people across all fields have noticed that if people don't pay for something, they often don't respect it. So the other day I was privy to a conversation between several veterinarians who were discussing doing work for very, very, very poor people. And it was interesting. They all came to the same conclusion that so many other people have come to the same conclusion on with different vocations, that they got into this doing it for the love of the animals, and they love helping poor people. And what they have found is, regardless of whether the people are poor or rich themselves who are coming in, that if they don't charge anything, they get disrespected. So they charge very poor people less, and they may take it in some sort of trade, but like some foodstuffs or something they have. But if they don't charge anything, they also don't receive respect. And I've noticed this for a long time, that when I was doing a lot of talks, I found it very, very consistent that if I was paid to come and do the talk, I would be treated very well generally. And when I wasn't paid, when I volunteered, I was not treated very well quite often. Not always, but quite often, such that I was going to an event for free and on my dime, and they forgot to pick me up at the airport. And so I'm just stuck. That would never have happened if they were paying me a fair amount. Or another time, I was doing a volunteer event, a fundraiser for a small environmental organization, and I did it with them not giving me a dime. And I get there, and I start my talk, and about a half hour into my talk, one of the organizers comes up and interrupts me, and I had driven several hours each way to do this talk. Anyway, about a half hour into my talk, one of the organizers comes up and says, just in the middle of my talk, interrupt in the middle of the sentence, says, "Can you stop, please, so that we can dance?" And I said, in this case, no. I drove many hours to get here. There are people in the audience who drove many hours to get here, and so I'm going to go ahead and finish my talk. But that would never have happened had he been paying me. And I'm not saying this in terms of paying for things being good. I'm saying this that there's this I'm going to try to wend my way through some things. First, that people across all fields have noticed that if people don't pay for something, they often don't respect it. And so one thing I want to start with is, I think this is partly from a lack of relationship, because if you're in a relationship, then, if you're in a relationship, then it's not expected that when we're sitting at the table and you say, "Could you please pass the potatoes?" it is expected that I'm going to give them to you for free. And it's not that you disrespect them because you didn't have to pay me to pass the potatoes. But the thing is, we're in a relationship. And if every time you ask me to pass the potatoes, I do, and every time I ask you to pass the cornbread, you don't, then we're going to have a conflict. And so it evens out in reciprocal relationships. And that's one part of this. But then what I really want to get to is that we see this, the place we see, if you don't pay for it, you don't respect it, is with this culture's relationship to the natural world. The natural world created created these systems that would deliver water. That's created this huge, these plumbing systems called rivers that would deliver clean, fresh water to right next to where you live, and all the water you could ever drink. And not only that, but there's food in this water delivery system too. And do we respect those? No, we don't respect those. On the other hand, we're really excited because somebody builds a canal, because we built it. We paid for it. We made that happen. We see this all the time with scientists in labs getting all excited because they created some enzymes that are some of the building blocks of life. Yeah, look what we did. We're so amazing. We spent $800 bazillion in order to create some enzymes that if we spend another $800 bazillion might become something, that if we spend another $800 bazillion, eventually we'll get to the place where we can make a fluffy baby bunny. Well, the thing is, fluffy baby bunnies make fluffy baby bunnies all the time, and we don't respect them. And we in this culture treat all this planet. You know, I saw, and I think we've done a video on this, I saw a bumper sticker one time that was that said, "Drive it like you stole it," and that struck me as a wonderful metaphor for how this culture treats the planet, that we live on this planet like we stole it. And I think for me, that's a little bit of the problem from most individual to most social on the disrespect with which people give for which the things that they don't pay for, is that they treat them as though they stole them. And part of the problem is that there is always a price to be paid, and there is no surplus in nature. And if I take salmon from the river, that means somebody else doesn't get those salmon. And that's okay, that's just part of life. But this all ties back to a conversation I had 15 years ago, 18 years ago, where a guy told me that because I use toilet paper, I am just as culpable for deforestation as the CEO of Weyerhaeuser. And I said no, and he said yes, and I said no. And then one day I was walking through the forest, and I said to a tree, I asked a tree, am I as culpable for deforestation as CEO of Weyerhaeuser? And the tree said something in response, which was, you're an animal, you consume things, get over it. And then it also said that the fundamental predator-prey relationship is that if I consume the flesh of another, I now take responsibility for the continuation of the other's community. So if I eat salmon from the Klamath River, I now take responsibility for the continuation of their community. That's how I pay for it. And and everybody knows this, the mergansers know that if they eat all the newts in the pond, there won't be any newts in the pond. So they have to, part of their payment for eating the newts in the pond is taking responsibility to make sure that there are newts in the pond in the future. And so yes, I am in fact culpable for deforestation, but not because I use toilet paper. I'm culpable for deforestation because I use the flesh of trees and I don't pay for it by taking responsibility for the continuation of the other's community. And I have no doubt that every one of those veterinarians, by stopping Weyerhaeuser, etc., I have no doubt that every one of those veterinarians who was in that conversation would have no problem at all giving away their labor and expertise for free to anyone who wanted it, so long as that person helped to maintain the community of whom the veterinarian is a part.